Okay, this is hopefully going to be a quick video on learning. Um, Probably you're like, well, I've been doing this for 14 years now. What could you possibly teach me? So probably the answer is nothing. But nevertheless, um, I'm going to try to sort of give you some context for your learning. So Wendell Berry talked about relevance of education, sort of what is the purpose of education. Well, life is large, surprising, and mysterious, and you will never know what you need to know. Um, in order to prepare you for life, then education needs to have abundance and variety. It needs to have adventurousness and thoroughness, and you will need to learn everything you can learn. You'll need to know more than you can possibly know. So I hope that I haven't dissuaded you, depressed you so far. Um, but we're going to talk about the three learning outcomes. First outcome then is no learning. Well, I hope you haven't come to Texas Tech University, gotten an education, and leave with no learning. Um, so you'll need to ask yourself then, what's your goal of being in college? Is it to get a really thick, nice, big piece of paper with a seal on it? Because that and 50 cents will buy you a piece of bubble gum outside the Walmart, but it won't be useful to you in um, getting and keeping a job and being good at your job. So if this is the goal, if the outcome's no learning, then you get no knowledge, and you're not able to demonstrate your knowledge on either retention type tests or transfer type tests. Meaningful learning is a different outcome. It's an outcome I'm striving for in this course. And the description of the cognitive mechanism is integrated knowledge. So you're coming to class, you're coming to the course with some degree, some framework for understanding the world generally, and HDFS material specifically. And in the course, you are given an opportunity to expand that framework of knowledge, to plug in some holes in that framework of knowledge, um, and to sort of increase your understanding of this general topic and of the world in general. And so, because you have acquired knowledge of the topic, you do good on retention tests, tests that require you to merely regurgitate information or to recognize information like terms or lists. But you would also be good at transfer tests. Those are tests like essay tests that ask you to apply your knowledge to a new or novel situation. And for those of you going into a medical profession, transfer tests, um, you also see that in the clinical setting. So you will have learned something in your lecture courses, and then a clinical setting will give you an opportunity to demonstrate that with a real live person in real time. And you'll need to have this integrated knowledge to do that, because the person sitting in front of you will not be the person from your book, and merely knowing the definitions of terms won't help you when you're being asked to apply theories and information to this unique human sitting in front of you. So that really should be the goal of higher education, in my opinion. Number three, unfortunately, where we've gone with in primary and secondary education with these uh, damn standardized tests, and now we're seeing that mentality, that learning style creeping into higher education, is rote learning, and so that's really just memorization. Are you able to memorize facts, dates, lists, terms, and then regurgitate that in some sort of a way on an objective test that we can run through a Scantron machine? That produces fragmented knowledge, so that knowledge in a vacuum without any context. I know that I'm seeing fragmented knowledge when I see students in hallways with gigantic stacks of index cards, because what that is a bunch of facts in no particular order with no particular sense or framework for that knowledge. It's just a fact that will fit on a 3x5 card. Um, so it tends to work well for retention tests. You can study like that and answer short answer tests. You can study like that and recognize the right answer, or at least eliminate the wrong answers on multiple choice tests. But that kind of learning does very poor in applying. So for transfer tests, for case study tests, for essay tests, for clinical practice, or for clinics, that type of learning is useless because you will have memorized this information in a vacuum, and you're being asked to contextualize, and you can't contextualize if you don't have some degree of integration, some degree of framework for that for those facts. So this may answer some of you who do well in rote classes and memorization classes, but don't do well in essay tests, don't do well when you're asked to synthesize or apply or extend the information that you've been given to new or novel situations. So what is your learning goal? Why are you here in higher education? Why didn't you go to work right out of high school? Why didn't you go into the military? Why didn't you do something else? Why did you come here? Was it for the beer? I mean, that's largely why I went to college. But let's say it's not. Let's say we're answering this question honestly from this idea of learning. Is it to remember things? So to produce or to recognize material that was presented to you. Well, that's this fragmented knowledge again. The problem with trying to remember stuff is your memory is this limited fixed object. You can only stuff so much information in it. You know, every time you drink too much, every new birthday, you will be losing the ability to remember what you have been exposed to. So I'll propose to you that your learning goal should be to understand. So to construct a coherent mental representation of the material that you can sort of rely on, apply to new and novel situations in order to make sort of an educated guess. And that's really what practice is. I don't care whether you're practicing social work, family services, or some healthcare occupation. You're engaging in the daily educated guesswork, and that's sort of what you do. That's what you get paid for. And what you need for that is this framework of how all of these components, the theories, the facts, the stages, the theorists, how that all of that fits together to make sort of a narrative or a coherent picture. That way you can sort of make guesses based on that narrative. So that's integrating knowledge, having a framework. So how do we assess remembering? We assess remembering with retention tests again. So can you recognize what was presented? That's multiple choice type exams. Of these 4 answers, can you recognize the one that you've seen before? Or can you produce what was presented? And if I give you a short answer blank and I ask you Erikson's 8 stages, can you write, unfortunately we don't even require you to write all 8. Can you write 5 of the 8? Can you get them sort of in order? So can you hold it in your head from the hallway to the desk long enough to regurgitate it onto an exam? That's not what I want. I want understanding. How do you assess understanding? With transfer tests, so tests like essay tests, tests like case studies. Can you solve problems that were not expressly given the material? For example, back to Erikson, if I give you an intervention and ask you, would this intervention work with 14-year-olds based on Erikson's theory? I'm not going to do this in a theory class, but if I were to give you that, you would need to have an understanding of not only the stages, but the interstage transitions, why those stages are important, how those stages relate to biological mechanism that work in the person. And so that's what I'm talking about applying knowledge to new and novel situations. Same with a case study. If I give you meet this family, what do apply something to this family? It's not going to be a family you've ever seen before because no two families are the same. So metaphors for learning. If learning is merely the acquisition of information, or in other words, the memorization of facts, then information is considered to be objective. That is, these things are facts. You are an empty vessel. The student is an empty vessel. You're a learner. And my job is to pour these facts into you, and to select the correct facts, to pour them in such a way that you in your empty vessel brain can receive them. So as a learner, you're a passive recipient. Your job is just to absorb. You add this information to your memory, where you hope to hold it for some period of time, and I'm ultimately responsible for any poor performance on your behalf because I didn't pour correctly, I poured too fast, I poured too slow, I didn't pick the right facts, etc., etc. Well, the metaphor of learning that I want you to hold in your head is this idea of a mental model. So there's you in the world, and you will be experiencing the world and working in the world by using this mental model. So, in other words, learning is a knowledge construction, and because it's knowledge construction, it's personally constructed by you. Your framework, in other words, your concept map for assignments for this class, but in general, your framework of knowledge is like no one else's because you have unique experiences. It's your job to make sense of the material and to organize it and integrate it yourself so that you don't have to rely on memory to hold it. You have a framework that exists not in your memory but in your understanding. My job is merely as a facilitator and to assist you with guidance. My Siri is talking to me. Why in the hell is my Siri talking to me? I don't want to message anyone. Oh, Jesus Christ. Let's turn this off. That's what I'm going to do. Alright, sorry for that brief interlude. So anyway, my job here is to give you opportunities to have exposure to knowledge for you to use in your mental model. And so I can do that in a bunch of different ways. I can present information in a book form and present information in class. I can give you an opportunity to experience information or experiences outside of class. My job is to facilitate your learning, and ultimately that makes you responsible for learning. So how do you approach reading for each of these? There's different ways of reading. I'm going to just put these up all at the same time. So scanning, that would be if you receive an email, so in your inbox somewhere, you've got an email with someone's phone number, and you're just looking through that for the phone number. You're looking for one thing, you're scanning, you're disregarding all other information. Skimming is you're sort of just trying to get a sense of the information, but going through it very quickly. So this is probably how you read your Facebook feed. You're flicking through these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of timeline posts just to see, if there's something interesting, if there's something you need to like or dislike or friend or unfriend. So you do that very quickly without any degree of understanding. light reading. This is how you would read, you know, the Divergent series, for example, or read the vampire books. Um, how you read the books you read for pleasure if you do. So you're reading, you don't necessarily read every word, you read quickly, you skip over relevant sections, you skip two relevant sections. Word by word reading, that's how I read for so long for college and for law school, and that's to sit here in front of this book and just to read every single word as if the goal is not learning, but the goal is to go from the first word in the chapter to the last word in the chapter by looking at every word. It's time consuming, it takes concentration, it takes focus, you tend to sort of zone out. And if you're actually trying to do this correctly, when you zone out and you read a page or two without even remembering it, then you need to go back. But a lot of us are just like, well, screw it, and keep plugging along. That takes a long time. I don't want you to do that. I want you to read to study. So reading to study reading. So that's this SQR4, SQ4R method. So there's multiple steps involved in this. First step is the survey. You actually take advantage of the things that the publishers and the authors have put in here that we usually skip. So like you would in chapter 1, you would look on page 1 at the chapter outline. You would even read the introduction beginning on page 2 to the middle of page 3 that gets you an idea of what the chapter is about. Then you would skip all the way over to the end and you would read the chapter summary on page 31, look at the discussion questions, scan over the internet sites to get a sense of what's in this chapter. Also look at the figures and whatever's in the blue boxes. Why are you doing that? Well, you're doing that to formulate questions before you start reading. What interests me about this chapter? What information do I need to get out of this chapter? And so you need to formulate some questions about this just based on that survey. Then you read. So you read carefully and actively, not to look at every word and burn it into your retinas, but to answer the questions that you formulated in the previous section. So when you get over to page 3, the Changing American Family, all you need to read, what you need to get out of that section is not every word, all of those statistics. You don't need to know the 73 million in 2003 number, the 69.9 million in 1966 number. That's all irrelevant. What are they trying to say about the American family? Once you get that from this section, you are finished with this section. Same with the problems of children and young person on page 4, same thing. You're not necessarily reading through each one of these, through each word of this and studying these statistics. You're trying to get the point. You're understanding the point of what's that. What are they? You're fulfilling the promise of some of these subheadings. What does being poor means being at risk mean? Once you get that, you're good to go. So you'll stop at the end of each section, at the end of the Changing American Family on page 3, on page 4. You'll stop at the end and go, well, how did the American family change? Well, it changed in this way. So you'll answer that question and move on. So at some point, like there, you will look away and try to tell and sort of recite to yourself, what have you learned so far? This doesn't need to be in any sort of formal way. You don't need to do this in writing, but you need to be checking in with yourself to make sure that you're actually wrestling with the information and not merely trying to absorb it. So again, you'll get to the section end of page 4 and you'll say, well, what's changed about the American family? Try to look away, recite that, describe what they're trying to describe, the author's point from that section. When you can do so, you're ready to move on. And do that for each major section. Then and only then do you mark the textbook. So what I don't want you marking the 73 million in 2003 number, the 69 million in 1966 number, but there may be one sentence or one clause in here that captures the important thing about what you think is important from this section. Then you highlight that, make a margin note, and move on. That's how you keep from marking everything up, is by going back very quickly and marking the most important thing. So then you will put all the information together in some sort of larger framework. I've given you the opportunity to do this in a concept map that you'll turn in for credit, but that's really what you do here is how is the changing American family related to problems of children and young persons? How are those two sections related together? How is that related to rights and responsibilities? So you'll see what I've done in giving you the first concept map. Now that's going to be slightly misleading because that's really just summarizing this chapter. And when we get later on, you'll need to be doing more than just summarizing the chapter. You'll need to be integrating 2 or 3 chapters together and not just giving me those as summaries. But for now, you can look at what I've given you in concept map 1 to indicate sort of this idea of here's the framework of knowledge from this section. So then you can use this map to study, use this map to give yourself hypothetical questions to answer when you get to the end, to really answer the questions. Like identify problems that face children and youth. Well, you don't need to memorize those problems. You can hypothesize about those problems based on based on the changing American family, based on problems of children and young people like poverty, violence, substance abuse. Okay, so how do you, this has taken me 20 minutes to explain. How does this not take you longer than sitting down and reading every word? Well, it just doesn't. You save time by being active, so being actively engaged, by being able to come and go from the you don't have to sit down and read all at once. You can take these as small chunks of information, and once you get the idea of this section, and you have recited, and you have made some margin notes, and you'll have added this to some sort of a framework in your concept map or not, then you can go away and come back at a different time, and you won't have lost anything. You'll have sort of closed the door on that bit of knowledge in that section of the chapter. Then for other classes, really other classes that require testing, you don't ever need to cram. It's not about memorizing, it's about understanding, and you're just constantly going back to this framework for understanding. You're not overlearning, so you're not learning a bunch of things that you won't be tested over. You are just reviewing, and so it's a constant process of reading, sort of consolidating, and then later reviewing. You can take a bunch of study breaks. Long-term retention's better. So this is the summary. You do not want to be the passive learner, empty vessel that either does light reading or tries to do this heavy, time-consuming, word-by-word reading, which requires you to cram before a test, which puts everything in your short-term memory, which doesn't give you anything to take away from the course other than a course credit. and result in fragmented knowledge. You want to be an active learner who's actively involved in constructing knowledge in each course, but also between courses so that you have this sort of entire framework of HDFS or the entire framework of human services to move forward with in grad school, to move forward with in nursing school, to move forward with in the workforce. The way to do that is to read actively, to take a lot of breaks, um, and distribute your study over a long period of time. That's why I've given you. I do realize that the reading is due the Sunday before the week we're going to cover it, but you have the entire previous week to be working through the chapter. It adds to your understanding. It gives me an opportunity to test you, although we don't have a lot of tests in the class again, um, in a way with a case study or with application to novel and unique situations. So that's the presentation. I hope it was helpful. If you have any questions about this, show up to online office hours or to in-person office hours on Wednesday. Online office hours are on Tuesday.